it up, but it was something like, again, that 20-25% enjoyed budgeting. Everybody else is like, please, I'd rather go to the dentist and have a root canal. It's definitely one of those things that for most people, they sit down, they talk if they have to, but it's definitely not something that they're excited about. And as a result, what usually ends up happening is that one person or the other is more budget oriented, I guess, if you want to say it that way. Like one person,
Yeah.
by the way, this is not gender related. It could just as easily be the wife is the husband who wants to sit down and talk about money. But whoever that is more likely to drive the process. And so that process gets driven with one party sometimes feeling like what they value isn't valued. We talked about that last time. And so the budget gets done, things get decided on, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then it just doesn't get followed quite right. And it's because one or both people don't feel like they were invested fully in the process. And that's why we say talking about it and understanding these things first is essential.
You talked last time about people falling into two categories often, the saver and the spender. How does that break out sexually, men and women?
Well, believe it or not, it's 50-50 on both sides. I was expecting the stereotype of women are more likely to be the spenders and men more likely to be the savers because, you hear sometimes stereotypes for a reason, but statistically that was not the
That's
case.
a surprise to me.
Yeah, women were just as likely to be the one who's like, we have to save the money. We have to be careful about this. Now, men, again, are more likely to feel the burden to provide, even if they're the spender. Those two things may seem like they're in conflict, right? But that burden is there even if he likes his golf outings, or even if he likes the latest toy to edge the yard or whatever. He still has that feeling of needing to provide.
Okay, what's number 4?
So number 4 is, and this is the other gender-related one, that it turns out that men and women tend to have very different ways of communicating and processing about money. And this is actually different ways of processing about everything. It just happens to happen a lot when it comes to money. And I think you and I have talked about this before in previous broadcasts when we were talking about men and women, but it turns out that when you have a decision that has to be made, some financial decision, that kitchen thing is driving me nuts, it's rotting away in the cupboards, it's a danger, we have to fix it. Whatever that money decision is, women are more likely to be verbal processors. Women tend to think something like that through by talking it through. I hate it, we got splinters
you're
again.
Putting it nicely. They're bigger talkers.
You're going to get me in trouble. Well, statistically, and I will tell you, actually, there's a reason why you say that. And it's that statistically, women's brains are actually wired more to think things through by talking them through, whereas men's brains are wired exactly the opposite on average. And it's actively difficult for most men to think something through while they're talking it through. So men want to go underground. Like the guys described it as like an internal chess match. And to me that sounds very odd, but I guess the guys listening will know what I'm talking about, where they will take the thing needs to be fixed in the kitchen, and they will go underground and they'll do this chess match of, okay, well, if we do this and spend this amount of money, then this thing has to happen first. But if that happens, this thing has to happen over here. And they do this entire processing, and it can go on for days. And it pops out the other end as a decision. And he says, I think we should do this. Now, we as women, I think this is the beginning of the conversation. And I'm likely to say, if Jeff says, I think we should do this, I'm likely to say, well, but what about this? What about that? What about the other thing? And Jeff is thinking, I spent 3 days thinking about this. And so right there, you see this conflict that happens where all of this processing is happening in 2 different ways. So we're communicating in a very clashy kind of way because he's sharing what he's been thinking about. He thinks then that I'm criticizing him. Mm-hmm. And that